Спасибо большое. Прошу.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the 16th BRICS Summit has just successfully come to an end. It became the climax of the Russian chairmanship in the association as one of significant milestones in global political calendar. I have said multiple times that Russia was extremely thorough in executing its obligations as a chair in BRICS. We've held more than 200 events in 13 Russian cities. In particular, there were multiple meetings of sectoral ministers, different conferences, seminars were held as well, the business forum, and BRICS sports games were quite a success. This year, we have already worked in a new enlarged composition, and Russia was chairing the association and doing everything possible so that new members of the association would go through swiftly and smoothly through an onboarding process to the BRICS family. And I think we have succeeded in that. New participants have seen and understood that BRICS is the place to work and achieve results. They have felt that our association has the most important thing, mutual respect and mandatory consideration of each other's interests. I can state with satisfaction that all of them are working very actively in working formats and proposing useful and promising ideas and initiatives. As for Kazan Summit per se, you already know about it. 35 states have sent their delegations, as well as 6 international organizations. Such wide representation vividly testifies to the standing and role of BRICS, the growing interest towards cooperation with us from the states who truly conduct an independent and sovereign politics. Each of these states have their own path, their own model of economic growth, rich history, and culture. It is this civilizational diversity in unique combination of national traditions is the source of power and tremendous potential for cooperation, not only within BRICS, but also in that wide circle of like-minded countries which share goals and principles of our association. The summit program was very extensive. We've held sessions of BRICS member states in restricted and extended formats. They focused on relevant matters of the activity of the association and promising expansion of the partnership on 3 pillars: in sphere of politics and security, in trade and investment, in culture and humanitarian affairs. As per tradition, we've held an Outreach BRICS Plus session as well. This format has proven useful and it has already given us an opportunity for a direct and open dialogue of association members with our friends and partners from the states of the Global South and East. This year, the Russian chairmanship invited to this outreach format leaders of the CIS countries, as well as delegations of many states from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, as well as heads of executive bodies of a number of international organizations. We have exchanged opinions on key matters of international affairs, highlighting the exacerbated situation in the Middle East. We have reviewed the future cooperation between BRICS members and countries of Global South and East in the interest of inclusive, sustainable growth. It is important that all sessions and events, without exception, that I have just mentioned, were held in traditional BRICS spirit, in business-like and open manner, in atmosphere of mutual understanding. Such a constructive approach towards joint work has allowed us to have a thorough discussion throughout 3 days of the most wide spectrum of issues. At the summit, the Kazan Declaration of BRICS was adopted, and it sums up the discussions that were held. We believe that this is a comprehensive and composite paper with a positive agenda aimed into the future. It is important that it confirms the commitment of all of our states to building a more democratic, inclusive, and multipolar world order based on international law and the UN Charter. It enshrines the overall commitment to counter the use of illegitimate sanctions and attempts to undermine traditional moral values. BRICS states are committed to deeper partnership in financial sphere, will continue to have better interbank communications and create independent from external risks mechanisms of mutual settlements in national currencies. I can highlight that throughout the summit, we and colleagues have thoroughly discussed ways of joint efforts to stimulate investment in order to further economic growth in BRICS countries as well as in the global south and east countries. We'll continue to do that through the new development bank and its president, Madam Dilma Rousseff. Russia has proposed to extend Brazil's chairmanship in that bank and the mandate of the president of the bank, Madam Rousseff, with an understanding that this year Brazil is chairing G20 and next year it will be taking over the baton of the chairmanship in BRICS. And it's an open secret that, considering what we know about the situation that's happening around Russia, we don't want to transfer all the issues that are connected with that towards the institutions where we have an interest in their development. We'll cope with the issues that we have on our own. There is good promise for a stronger sectoral cooperation, implementation of new projects in industry, energy, logistics, high-tech, and many other key spheres. Naturally, for greater interaction between our countries in culture, science, sports, between youth and civil societies. In Kazan, we have confirmed that BRICS is not walling itself off from the rest of the world. It is open for everyone who shares BRICS values, and its members are prepared to jointly look for solutions without dictate from outside or attempts to impose some narrow approaches by anyone. BRICS cannot help but respond to greater demand in the world for such cooperation. Therefore, we have dedicated special attention to the matters of possible BRICS expansion through the establishment of a new category, partner states. These days, leaders and members of delegations communicated with each other quite a lot, informally as well. There are plenty of bilateral contacts and conversations that took place. We have, our delegation tried to hold meetings with the leaders of the majority of participating states. Ladies and gentlemen, the summit has come to a close. I would like to thank yet again all colleagues who have traveled to Kazan. Thank you for your input in our overall work. I would like to highlight, and I think it was quite a significant contribution. Throughout our chairmanship, we have felt vibrant support from our partners. It is important, especially since it's not coming to an end with our summit. There are plenty of important events slated till the end of the year. As I have already said, next year we're transferring the baton of chairmanship to Brazil. Naturally, we'll provide every aid to our Brazilian friends. We'll cooperate with them. We'll continue close coordination with all BRICS partners in the interests of furthering our cooperation within our association. I would like to use this opportunity. I would like to genuinely thank the leadership of Tatarstan Mayor's Office of Kazan. Thank you for hospitality and every effort to make our joint work convenient. I would like to apologize to citizens of Kazan for certain inconvenience that they have come across. Movement of motorcades, closing off of certain highways and so on. But I'd like to assure you that these trials and tribulations were not in vain. I would like to thank you for making ourselves feel at home. Thank you so much. I would like to apologize. We cannot have a very long conversation with you responding to your questions for the fact that I have several bilateral meetings. I have 7 or something of that kind. So I cannot make my colleagues wait. Still, if you have any questions, please go ahead.
Let's go. Do it as swiftly as possible. First channel, Russian TV. Over to you, please. Anton Vernitsky, First channel. Mr. President, could you dwell a little bit on the financial cooperation between the BRICS countries? Have you discussed the joint investment platform? Have you also discussed setting up an alternative payment system? Have you discussed an alternative to SWIFT? Thank you. As for SWIFT and for an alternative to SWIFT, we're not setting up any alternative to anything. That said, your question is very important in the current climate. One of the key issues is the issue of payments and settlements, and that is why we are pursuing the track of using our national currencies, which is well known. As for settlement structures, we are using a Russian system for exchanging financial messages, which has been developed by the Bank of Russia. Other BRICS nations have systems of their own, and we're going to use them, and we are already using some of them, and we're going to pursue this path further. But if you are asking about a separate joint system, we are not going there yet. What we have is sufficient for now. We only have to make timely decisions at the administrative level. This is yet another issue that we have discussed with the colleagues, and we will continue along this path. Second row, please, this sector, yes. Let's move on. And please introduce yourself. RIA Novosti, Ilya Uzhorov. Mr. President, the Kazan Forum is the first time BRICS meets as not as 5 countries, but as an association with an expanded geography, and there are discussions about further expansion, and many countries have expressed their willingness to work with BRICS closely, and there is also the partner nation, another status which is currently being worked through. So what is the current message that the BRICS Summit in Kazan gives to further BRICS expansion? As I've said, there are many countries that are showing interest in working in this format. 35 countries have taken part in the events in Kazan, and we have agreed with our partners that on the first stage, I'm talking about a potential expansion, we are going to agree on a list of partner countries, and we've agreed upon such a list. And some of the countries that have taken part in these events today and yesterday have handed over their proposals to us with a view to participating as a fully fledged members in the BRICS Association. So this is how it's going to develop further. We are going to send out invitations and proposals to future partner nations, proposing that they should participate in such a capacity in our association, and once we have a positive response, we will announce who is going to be on this list. It would not be proper for us to do that, to publicize that until we have received some feedback, even though almost all of these countries have sent their proposals and requests in the past. Izvestia, I think, yes, this sector, one of the last rows. Yes, Viktor Sinyok, Izvestia News. We are aware that during your many bilaterals, you've broached the subject of the conflict in Ukraine. So what is the vein in which you have discussed what is happening in the special military operation zone, and what do you think is the attitude of your partners towards that? Has there been any support voiced for our country? Everyone is determined that this conflict should come to an end as soon as possible, and preferably through peaceful means. You're aware that the People's Republic of China and Brazil have come up with an initiative in the course of the General Assembly in New York. Many BRICS countries show support to this initiative, and we, on our part, are grateful to our partners for showing interest in this conflict and for searching for ways towards settling this conflict. Thank you. Moving on, I see our colleagues from the US. NBC, please. Yes, the same sector. And please give our colleagues the mic. Thank you.
Mr. President, Keir Simmons from NBC News. Mr. President, satellite images are said to show North Korean troops here in Russia. What are they doing here? And wouldn't that be a massive escalation in the Ukraine war? And Mr. President, we are weeks away from the US election. Russia again is accused of interfering, and that you have had private conversations with former President Trump. Have you been speaking with him, and what have you been saying?
Well, let me take up first the first part of your question. Satellite images, well, that is something serious. If there are images, then they are a reflection of something. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that it's not the Russia's actions that have led to an escalation in Ukraine. Rather, it is the coup d'etat in 2014, which was supported first and foremost by the US. The US has even publicly announced how much money it has spent back then to organize and orchestrate this coup d'etat. Wasn't that the path to escalation? And then for 8 years, we were being duped when we were being told that everyone wants to achieve a peaceful settlement to the conflict in Ukraine via Minsk agreements. You have probably heard afterwards a number of European leaders have said publicly that they had been duping us because they had been using that time to rearm the Ukrainian troops. Isn't that a fact? It is. Another path towards escalation consisted in the fact that the European countries started to actively provide weaponry to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian regime, and it went as far as direct participation of NATO troops in this conflict, because we are aware of how and what is being done when UAV unmanned vessels in the Black Sea are being operated and sent. We know who is present there, what NATO countries are involved, and how they are doing that. And the same goes for instructors. And these are not mercenaries, these are military instructors. And the same goes for the use of precision-guided missiles such as Storm Shadow, ATACMS, and other things like that. Ukrainian troops are incapable of doing that without Western intelligence, without sharing the goals. And it is only possible through the direct involvement of NATO officers. Now, as for our relationship with the North Korea, you know, we ratified our Treaty on Strategic Partnership, which contains Article 4, and we have never doubted the fact that North Korean leadership is very serious about their commitments to us and engagement with that. But as for how we do and what we do, it's up to us to decide under Article 4 of this treaty. First, we need to hold the relevant talks about implementing Article 4 of the Treaty on Strategic Partnership with North Korea. We're in contact with our friends from North Korea. We'll see how this process develops. That said, the Russian armed troops are moving forward very steadily. No one can contradict that. It's moving forth at all the parts of the line of contact. Our troops are very active in the Kursk direction part. Some of the Ukrainian units that have mounted an incursion into the Kursk region have been blocked and encircled. This group totals around 2,000 people. There are attempts at deblocking that from outside. There are also attempts at a breakthrough from the inside. Right now, the Russian troops are proceeding to eliminate this group of forces that has been encircled. Now, as for my contacts with Mr. Trump, well, this is a thing that has been discussed through rumors for many years now, Moldova, because first there were accusations that there had been some alleged ties between Trump and Russia, but then there was an internal inquiry in the US, probably in US Congress, if I'm not mistaken, and the conclusion they had arrived at is that it was all nonsense. Nothing like that had ever taken place, nor is anything like this is taking place right now. Now, as for how the Russian-US relations are going to be constructed after the election, it is first and foremost up to the US. If the US is open towards building a normal, healthy relations with Russia, then we will do the same. If you don't one that it's up to them, but it's going to be the choice of the future administration. Pavel Zarubin, well, there's no going around you. Good evening, Pavel Zarubin, Russia TV channel. If you don't mind, as a follow-up to the previous question, former President Trump and now the one running for president, he said that during one of the previous conversations he was threatening you with a strike against the center of Moscow. So is there any chance that anyone can menace you like that? And what do you think about this trend towards publicizing confidential talks between the leaders, which are currently becoming increasingly publicized? And another thing, do you feel isolated? Do you miss conversations with your Western counterparts? That is the last part of my question. Thank you. Well, the first part, is it possible to menace anyone, to threaten anyone? Well, there's no point in menacing Russia because it only energizes us, galvanizes us, but I don't remember any conversation with Mr. Trump like that. Currently, this is the critical stage in the electoral campaign in the US, so I would advise against taking such statements too seriously. But as for what Mr. Trump said just recently and what I heard is that he's been talking about his aspiration to do everything to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine. And I think he's sincere when he says that. And such statements, whomever they come from, is something we certainly hail. Oh yes, isolation. You know, we are getting different messages from our Western counterparts with regard to potential contacts. We've never closed ourselves off from these contacts. And when someone is saying that I refuse to talk to anyone or to have contacts, including with European leaders, I can tell you these are lies. We've never refused such contacts. We've never done that in the past, and we're not doing that now. If there is anyone who wants to resume talks with us, we sing everywhere, all the time that we're open, we're not trying to impose on anyone. You know, we live and we develop. Our economy is growing. Last year, our growth was 3.4%, 3.6%. This year, it's going to be 4%, maybe 3.9%. The Eurozone economy is currently teetering on the brink of recession. The US is demonstrating some growth at 3.1%, 3.2%, which is a good figure, but still there are a lot of problems in the American economy. There is a big deficit in most important parameters, a deficit of external trade, of payment balance, and also there is an enormous debt at several dozens, trillions, if I'm not mistaken. But it's best if we do not have a conflict with one another. Rather, we should think how we could address all of these issues together. Let's have two more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Our colleagues from Africa, this sector, please. Mike here is the center of the sector.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je ne sais pas si je peux m'exprimer en français. On peut traduire en anglais si c'est
Just a second, please. У нас есть французский, да, перевод? Есть. Okay, go ahead.
OK. Alors, je suis Sike Ndoumbe, journaliste d'un média panafricain depuis le Cameroun, For You Media Africa. Monsieur le Président, nous revenons, mon équipe et moi, du Donbass. Et nous sommes en train de réaliser un documentaire dans le Donbass pour montrer les réalités. Et ce que nous avons vu, c'est que le Donbass parle à l'Afrique. Alors, Monsieur le Président, nous savons que les États africains aujourd'hui sont victimes des groupes armés, de terrorisme et de l'insécurité.
African countries, and many of them are right now victims of terrorism and other actions that are aimed at destabilization of African states.
On a vu la Russie également en République centrafricaine.
At the same time, we see that Russia is helping in Central African Republic and other Sahel countries. Before that, there were other countries present there. And only after the arrival of Russia, it was possible to stabilize the situation there and in other countries. Therefore, the question is the following. Isn't it time for Russia to deepen such ties, such partnerships, not only in military sphere, but also to develop relations in other spheres with African states as well? Thank you.
I fully agree with you. This is exactly what we're doing in the BRICS countries. We believe that setting up a BRICS platform is something we should do. I have just talked to my colleagues at the last stage of our summit, and I have been telling them that according to our experts, the economy of such countries as Saudi Arabia, China, Russia is going to develop at a steady pace, so there's going to be some positive dynamics in terms of economic growth. Yet there are certain regions of the world which, according to our opinion, according to our estimates, development is going to soar. It's going to pick up very fast. I refer in particular to Africa and East Asia. That is why currently within BRICS we are coming up with the proposal of setting up a new investment platform using cutting-edge digital instruments.
In order to create such a system, and surprisingly, it can be done, and to create conditions for investment efficiently, fast developing markets in these regions of the world, first and foremost in Africa. Why do we think so? I believe that many would agree with me. There are several reasons for it. Number one, these countries have fast population growth. In Africa, and I was talking yesterday with Prime Minister of India, each year they have a growth of 10 million people per year. That is the increase of Indian population, and Africa is showing the same growth rate. Second, these regions of the world have a rather low level of urbanization right now, and it will increase, that's for sure. These countries will try to achieve and catch up to the life standards of what they have compared to possibly to other regions of the world, including with Europe. All of that, as well as a number of other factors, are telling us that the growth rate, and there will be also capital accumulation that's already happening. All that tells us that these regions of the world deserve special attention. Therefore, we with colleagues are talking to each other, and we're trying to create a working group based on using the basis of new development bank in order to create the mechanisms of efficient and reliable investment in these countries. And I think that everyone would win from that. Those who invest and those who would be invested in, because that would mean the creation of new production facilities that would provide revenue and income from the investment. For that, we need to create instruments that would be independent from external risks. First and foremost, political changes. I believe it can be done. That's the path that we'll follow. Thank you very much for this question. That's a very important question. Now, moving on to the final question of today, I would like to give the floor to BBC. A rare guest these days, Steve Rosenberg. BBC, wearing a hat or something? I've read the outcome declaration of BRICS, and it speaks about the need for global and regional stability and security in a just world. And the motto of Russian chairmanship in BRICS includes such ideas, I believe, justice and security. But how does it come together with your actions over the past 2.5 years, the intrusion of Russian troops into Ukraine? Where is justice, stability, and security in that? Security of Russia as well. Because before the beginning of a special military operation, there were no drone attacks against Russian territory, no shelling of Russian cities, no foreign troops occupying Russian territories. It wasn't there at that time. The second thing, how does it come together with a statement of British intelligence, a recent one, that Russia has set a goal for itself to start chaos on the streets of Great Britain and Europe with arson and sabotage? So how does it come together with that? I'll start with Russian security, because for me, that's the most important thing. You spoke about drone attacks and so on. Yes, indeed, we didn't have that, but there was a much worse situation, and it was that we received, as a response to our constant proposals, they were very insistent proposals with the Western countries, we were always being told where is our place is, and I can tell you that for sure. So it seems everything is very nice at the surface, but in principle we're always shown where we're supposed to be. And in the end, where we were supposed to be would lead us to falling back of Russia, of sliding to the second-tier countries, which are only serving the purpose of commodity markets, of appendages, with a loss to a great extent of our national sovereignty. And Russia could not develop, and moreover, could not even exist if it cannot exist if it loses its sovereignty. That's the most important thing. And the way Russia could step out of the situation to strengthen its sovereignty in economics, finance, and military affairs means our security. That means that we create the conditions for its successful development in the future as an independent state, self-sufficient and a fully fledged state. And the partners that we have in BRICS that respect independence of Russia, respect our traditions, and we treat our partners the same way. Now, as for justice, in development and security, right? Did I write it down right? Yes, okay. Look, I have certain notions about that, and I'll try to answer your question. So my ideas are the following. What is justice in terms of development? Look, recent events during the pandemic of COVID-19 showed us what happened. I would like to point your attention to this, as well as the attention of all other media as well. At that time, the United States have conducted an issuance of about $6 trillion in bonds. And in Eurozone, they printed about $3 trillion. They've thrown all this liquidity to global markets, buying everything up. First and foremost, food, medicines, and vaccines that are now being destroyed en masse because their issue date, the expiration date is already passed. That led to inflation, food inflation around the world. So what the leading economies of the world did, they abused their exclusive position in global finance, both of dollars and euros. They've printed all that money, and they've vacuum cleaned the whole market of all most necessary goods. You're consuming more than you're producing and earning. Is that just? We don't think so, and we want to change the situation, and that's what we are doing in BRICS. Now, as for security in general, as for Russian security, I have already said it. I know what you're saying, but is it just in terms of security that for years our permanent appeals towards partners have been ignored? Our appeals not to expand NATO to the east, is it just to lie to our face, promising that there will be no such extensions, and then violate their obligations and do that? Their promises and do that? Is it very just to get into our underbelly? Is it just to get to Ukraine and start building, not just preparing to build, but building military bases? Is that just? Is it just to conduct a coup d'etat that I've just spoken about, responding to your colleague's question, disregarding international law and all principles of international law and the UN Charter, financing a coup d'etat in a different country, here in Ukraine, pushing the situation towards development into a hot phase? Is it just in terms of global security? Is it just to violate the obligations that they have within the OSCE when all Western countries have signed a paper according to which there is no security of one country at the expense of another? We told them, don't do it. It violates our security, this NATO expansion. Still, they did it. Is that just? There is no justice here, and we want to change that, and we'll achieve it. What was that? The statement about the British intelligence, that Russia is wreaking havoc on the streets of Britain. Well, listen, thank you. Thank you for reminding me about this part of the question. Well, this is complete nonsense. You see, what's happening in the streets of certain European cities is a result of domestic policy of those states. We know, and I have already told you about it. We are, well, the Eurozone, European economy is balancing on the brink of recession, and the leading EU economies are basically in recession. If they even show 0.5% growth, thanks to the South that doesn't have great industry through tourism and real estate. Well, what are we to do with that? The Western European countries just refuse to receive our energy point blank. Well, we're not refusing to do that. Still, there is one line of Nord Stream 2 that runs on the bottom of the Baltic Sea. They should just press the button and the gas will run. But they do that for political reasons. And their main partner, I don't know for what reasons, has created conditions when great sectors of German economies are moving to the US because the authorities there are creating better conditions for businesses. And primary commodities are 3 times cheaper or even 4 times cheaper than in Europe. Different conditions of taxation and so on. This is deliberate action, but how are we implicated in that? So that causes a certain response. The level of life, the standards of life are decreasing. It is very simple. These are statistics coming from the European countries themselves. But how are we implicated in that? Well, you know what we say in Russia? This is an attempt to shift the blame and to avoid responsibility for wrong decisions in economic sphere and in domestic politics. In economic sphere, well, I'll give you examples. Now, objective experts can see that clearly, and many people in Europe and in the United States abused and still continue to do so. The environmental agenda and rising global temperatures. They're getting ahead of themselves without enough basis in terms of technology development. They're closing down everything that has to do with nuclear energy and coal power generation. They're getting rid of hydrocarbons at all. Did someone calculate whether Africa can do without these types of hydrocarbons or no. No, but they're imposing on African countries and some other developing countries, they're imposing them modern technologies. Yes, maybe they're efficient in terms of saving the environment, tools and technologies, but they cannot buy them. They don't have the money. Give them the money, but they don't. However, they're pushing such tools of neo-colonialism. I believe these countries are being beaten down, and they make them be dependent on Western technologies and credit lines. And those loans are terrible. It's impossible to pay them back. Yet another tool of neo-colonialism. We need to look at the results of policy of the Western countries in economy, finance, and domestic politics. And naturally, people are afraid of exacerbation of global situation that has to do with escalation in different conflict zones in the Middle East, in Ukraine. But we are not the ones doing the escalation. It's the other side that's always doing this escalation, but we're prepared for that. Think about it. Are those countries who are doing that, are they prepared for it? We have several more minutes. If you would allow, a final question from Russian media from Tatarstan. Hold on a second. We'll go through sectors 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, okay? Let's start with the left sector.
Let's give the floor to the young lady. Arish Mohammed, Sky News Arabia, the UAE, Moscow Bureau. Mr. President, there is a number of reports saying that Moscow might provide support to Iran in case of an Israeli attack. What do you think about these reports? Do these reports reflect reality? Does Russia contemplate providing such aid at this stage of escalation in the region? Well, first, we're very concerned about what is happening in the region. Whoever says anything, Russia is not interested in an exacerbation of this conflict, because strategically we're not winning anything. Quite the contrary, we would only stand to see additional problems crop up. As for assistance to Iran, first, of course, we are in contact, close contact too, with the leadership of Iran, and we believe our role is to create conditions for a resolution of this situation through searching for mutual compromise. I think this is possible. And my contacts in the sidelines of the BRICS Summit show me that no one in the region wants an expansion of the conflict or a big war. No one wants that. Yes, please. Over to you. Kyrgyz Republic, as far as I understand. Mr. President, my name is Tursun Gebahum. I represent a human rights advocacy group for Central Asia. I represent not just civil society in Kyrgyz Republic, but also in Central Asia. First, congratulations on holding this summit at a high level. Thank you. And just anyone on this planet, I do not envy your position as the Russian president, because this is a heavy burden which we are carrying with honor and dignity. Right now, the Western countries wanted to weaken Russia, but they have failed, and this is testified to by the BRICS Summit, by the coming of UNSG Antonio Guterres and other international organizations. This year, Kazan is hosting historically important events. The multipolar world is emerging victorious. You have discussed difficult issues such as the Middle East. Despite the UN resolution, Israel flouts the resolutions. The UNSG has been declared persona non grata. There's been also a strike carried out by Israel. Right now there are reports that Israel is preparing to bomb nuclear and energy facilities of Iran. So my proposal is as follows. Shouldn't BRICS countries under the leadership of Russia should give a proper response to Western nations? Should they support Israel in a Western aggression against Iran and help Iran, Palestine and Lebanon, because only then will we be able to put an end to the impunity of the US in the Middle East. And another thing, right now the West is castigating and lambasting you, saying that President Putin refuses to engage in talks, but before that you put forth certain conditions and terms before the summit organized by Zelensky. What are your terms now? Have they remained unchanged? Thank you. Well, let's show some respect to others. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Да вот только что коллега спрашивала по поводу наших отношений с
Your colleague has just asked us about our relations with Iran, about our willingness to provide assistance. Let me say the first thing with regard to the situation in the Middle East. I said that I think there is not a single person in the Middle East whose heart does not bleed when he or she sees what is happening in Gaza. More than 40,000 people died there, and most of them are women and children. So our assessment there is well known, and we have been saying for quite some time what the resolution of that is. The only way forward is to remove the root causes of this situation, and the main root cause is the absence of a fully fledged state of Palestine. All the UN Security Council decisions with that regard should be observed and implemented. We have to work with all the participants of the process to prevent at all costs the exacerbation and the expansion of the conflict. We should also work with Israel. We have to admit Israel has suffered a terrorist attack in October last year. So we have to go around that in a calm fashion. We have to analyze everything accurately, but we should not condone disproportionate responses to such terrorist attacks. That said, we have to work with everyone and seek a lower level of confrontation. We need to decrease it, and in Lebanon in particular, I think on the whole it's possible, but we have to be very cautious. Well, I'm afraid to say too much because any ill-spoken word could harm the process. But on the whole, I would like to thank you for raising this issue because it is of the utmost importance. Now, as for our talks with Ukraine, I said that on multiple occasions. We are grateful to the President of Turkey, President Erdogan, in the past. He provided us with a venue, with a platform for talks with the Ukrainian delegation in the course of that negotiating process. In late 2022, we arrived at a potential draft peace agreement. The Ukrainian delegation initialed that document, which means they were happy with that, but then they reneged on the deal, and then assistant to President Erdogan phoned from New York saying that there are new proposals. They asked us to consider them, and I gave my green light. I said yes, okay. On the following day, the head of the Kiev regime said that they were not going to engage in any talks with that, and we told Turkey, thank you for participating, but first we have to deal with your clients. Do they want that or they don't? Let them say that straight to us what they want. But as far as I understand from their parliament, another plan has been voiced, not about a peace, but about a victory. Now, as for victory, when they were trying to mount a so-called counteroffensive, they suffered losses of 16,000 people, if my memory serves me right, irrecoverable losses, and century losses as well. Over the recent months in the Kursk direction, they've suffered even more losses, 26,000 people, both irrecoverable and medical losses, and also heavy losses of weaponry and equipment. Last year, they lost 18,000 units of military equipment. Right now, 1,000 more. By 1,000 more, they've lost many tanks, maybe fewer tanks this time because they're using them less frequently. I'm not sure about these figures, but I think they are right. And of course, they have to look at the realities to see what's the situation on the ground. And given this situation on the ground, they have to sit at the negotiating table and engage in talks. But the leaders of the Kiev regime do not want that. I think to a certain extent this is due to the fact that the start of peaceful negotiations would require them to lift the martial law, which means that afterwards, right after that, they need to hold the presidential election, and right now the ball is in their court. Let's move to this sector, please. Good evening. How far are you willing to go, Mr. President, to put an end to the war in Ukraine, and how far are they willing to go? I've just told you, haven't I? We're willing to consider any options of peaceful agreements based on the situation on the ground, on the realities, no more, no less. Yes, yes, over to you, please. Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. President. Saudi Arabia, Center for Russian Arab Research. If you don't mind, I'll ask my question in Arabic. BRICS has probably left in the past the stage when it was only a platform. Can we call it right now a centralized?
No, we don't have Arabic translation right now.
Yes. Идет перевод? I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry, yes, there is interpretation. I think that the current stage of BRICS requires a centralized administrative body for BRICS to turn into a center for managing contacts between the countries across the world. Say the country that is currently chairing BRICS is going to be replaced tomorrow by another country which might turn out to be less efficient or less careful about what it's doing. Secondly, Russia would like to build such a mechanism for working with its partners. Maybe this new development bank could work with other banks and similar institutions in other countries. Doesn't it mean that right now we need to set up funds for mutual investment? And last but not least, what do you think about Saudi Arabia's accession to BRICS? Can you tell us more about that? First, a couple of words about the organizing matters within BRICS. Yes, certainly this is an organization right now. This is a genuine fact, and you are absolutely correct. We need to give some structure to how this organization functions, and this is something my colleagues and I are working on. But on the whole, each and every part of the BRICS group is self-sufficient, and everyone sincerely strives for deepening ties within this association, so I do not expect any lapse in how the organization is functioning. At the same time, we would hate it for the organization to be mired in red tape. We would hate it there to be bureaucrats popping up who are going to drive luxurious cars, spending money right and left, earning exorbitant sums with no one knowing what exactly they are doing. But you've said aptly that we need to provide some structure, some framework to how the organization functions. You said that there is this new development bank. Yes, we've set it up. It has already funded 100 projects to the tune of 33 billion US dollars. But as for the investment process, and that is very important for such countries as Saudi Arabia, Russia, other countries, China in particular, and India, it is very important to have an opportunity to invest safely and efficiently into emerging markets. And this is precisely the essence of our proposal, aimed at setting up an investment platform. Now, as to Saudi Arabia, we're in good contact with our good friend, His Crown Majesty the Crown Prince, and we also have very good relations with His Majesty the King of Saudi Arabia. This event here was attended by our friends, the delegation from Saudi Arabia. We hope that these contacts are going to develop further. This sector. Yes, please, young lady over there. Yes, go ahead. I do not see what's on the placard. If you don't mind, I'll ask my question in Portuguese. My name is Bianca. I'm a global news journalist from Globo, which is the principal TV network in Brazil. My question is about Venezuela. Yesterday, you thanked President Nicolas Maduro for all his effort, in particular for his participation in BRICS. But Brazil is against that. So I would like to ask you which side Russia is on. Is there any chance Venezuela joins BRICS even against Brazil's will and wishes? Another thing, you thanked Brazil and China for coming up with the initiative aimed at finding a diplomatic solution to the conflict in Ukraine from 1 to 10, on a scale from 1 to 10. What are the chances that this plan is going to be a success? I mean, the plan on Ukraine. And what would you find absolutely inadmissible? As for the chances, it's difficult for me, nor would it be right on my part to give you any score from 1 to 10. I would hate to appear rude, but that's a fact.
These attempts to start negotiations later, going back on their word, well, I've just said that the High Representative of Turkey called us from New York directly. The same thing happened before. Turkey pitched an initiative about the situation in the Black Sea. Ensuring the freedom of navigation and safety of navigation, discussion and finding certain agreements about security of nuclear energy facilities and so on. We have agreed to that. Later, the head of Kiev regime said publicly, no negotiations. We also got back to our Turkey friends and told us to get their clients and understanding with them. But, well, you cannot go back go back on your word overnight. Well, they just shrugged it off. These are difficult partners. That's why I'm saying it's so hard to rate it from 1 to 10. The behavior of the Kiev regime leadership is very irrational. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. I won't give any other evaluations right now. I also believe that their provocation in the Kursk direction has to do with an attempt to try to have an impact on the election process in the U.S. and interference in those processes, and they try to show to those who are going to vote for the current president that their investment in Ukraine were not in vain, and they are prepared to do that at any price, also at the price of lives of their soldiers. They are working for the U.S., not to the interests of Ukrainian population. Therefore, a certain rating in points, it's completely impossible to do that. Now about Brazil and what Brazil thinks about what's happening in Venezuela. We know Brazil's stance. Our positions do not coincide with Brazil on the matters of Venezuela. I'm saying that openly. We've spoken about that on the phone with the day before yesterday with the president of Brazil. Have very good and I believe friendly relations. Venezuela is fighting for its independence, for its sovereignty. At a certain point in time, I remember that the leader of opposition, after the last elections, he stood on the plaza before the government and believes that he's a president by the will of God. Isn't it laughable? But if you discuss the situation with the leadership of the U.S., well, they've supported that opposition leader. They continue to do that. Well, they just shrugged it off as well. They smirked, and it's clear that it's ridiculous. Any person can raise his eyes to the overhead and say that he's a pope or something like that. Well, it cannot happen like that. There are certain electoral procedures. Go and run in the vote. We believe that President Maduro ran fair and square. He founded a government, and we wish him and his government every success, as well as to the Venezuelan population. But we truly hope that Brazil and Venezuela have a bilateral discussion and find a solution to their bilateral relations. I know President Lula, a very honest person with integrity, and I'm sure that that would be his stance, using an objective stance, and he will treat the situation objectively. He asked me to give some words to President of Venezuela during our telephone conversation, and I hope that the situation will even out. As for adoption of Venezuela or any other state to the ranks of BRICS, I would like to say that it is possible only with consensus. We have a rule of consensus. In order to adopt new candidates to the organization, to the association of BRICS, we need an agreement of all participants of this group. It's impossible to do this step without consensus. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please don't be cross with me, but my colleagues, my counterparts are waiting for me for bilateral meetings. Thank you. I have a very tough choice between you, a discussion with you, and going to meet my counterparts. Please don't be cross. Thank you very much.